Hi there. Welcome to Real Talk live at the barn. My name is Emilio Pardo, and I am so glad you're here. This is a very special place, the barn. So 21 years ago, we built this barn for friends and family, for conversation, for playing, for listening to music, but then slowly and gradually became a place to have a conversation about how to get through life, how to get through the week, how to get through the day. So as you can see, it is filled with memorabilia of different places that we've been and where people have brought us some trinkets from all around the world. But the real magic of this barn is the conversations and the real talk we've had here and the answers that we have found to some of our greatest problems. You see, we're going to 3 pandemics: a COVID pandemic, an economic pandemic, and a racial injustice pandemic. All 3 of these are creating havoc on our mental strength, and we need real talk to find real answers. You see, I know about real talk. I'm a cancer survivor, pancreatic cancer, but I'm also a communications practitioner that has helped many companies and organizations find answers and solutions to their problems. Now, we want to open up this barn and have real talk and pair you up with experts that can help us find some answers and tips on how to get through the day and how to get through these pandemics. So, welcome, sit back, pull up a chair, and let's have a real conversation. Let's get started. Welcome back. The barn is open. It's so good to see you guys, and it's great to be back at Real Talk. And boy, do we have a show here for you today. There are so many things that are happening and have happened in the last year on the pandemics that we've been talking about. And we have been getting a lot of requests to talk and deal about how do we deal with crisis, but how do we grow through crisis? And I can't wait to engage with you today on exactly that, but also get a little bit more practical. Today, we're also going to talk about something that is very much in front of our minds, which is how do we get through this vaccine maze? And how do we deal with the communications aspect of how do you cope with the crisis? So welcome back. Welcome to the barn. But before we go, I have a very special shout out that I want to make to my niece, Michelle Pinchuk. And Michelle, you are going through a lot, but I can't wait to have a glass of vino with you, and we're all rooting with you. I hope you feel better soon, and we love you very much. So Michelle, hang strong. I know that coronavirus is really keeping us apart, but hang in there, and we're all with you. But that's not what everybody does. Everybody is, and we're all in the middle of something that is frankly unique. And I found this cartoon that kind of explained how I was feeling and how do we go into this process here today. As you can see from the cartoon, we are in a place where we have never been before. And in this one, we moved a few things around. The travel books are in the fantasy section, politics are in the sci-fi, and epidemiology is in the self-help. Good luck with that. But it sort of frames up the concept of what we're all dealing with, and particularly, how do you communicate, both from a professional perspective in companies, and we have somebody here that is going to help us through that, Doug Levy, a crisis expert, that is going to give us tips on how do you tell your story regardless, and how do you communicate through these very difficult times and pandemics. And then we have, super excited about this, we have what I call a super connector on vaccines. Chris is a nationally known, now becoming nationally known person, especially as we go into this next phase of vaccines. And how do you get a vaccine appointment? I mean, that has to be like the biggest ticket. It's like the e-ticket back in the Disney days. But let's get going. My first guest is someone that you guys know very well, Richard Leiter, extraordinaire coach of coaches, Mr. Purpose. He's got a new book coming out, which we're going to do a show on. And the book is called What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Old? And I'm very excited to have Richard back here at the barn. And Richard, welcome back to the barn.
Thank you, Emilio. I love, love, love the cartoon. You know, I write books. This is my 11th book coming out, but recently not recently, but pre-pandemic in a bookstore. And I asked the woman at the counter, I said, can you tell me where the self-help section is? And she said, well, if I tell you, won't that defeat the whole purpose? Well, we're all looking for a little bit of self-help these days, but really it's about self-realization, not help. So
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about today, self-realization.
No, without a doubt, without a doubt. And Richard, while I have you, there's something that I wanted to share with our audience, and that's a few tips on how to deal with exactly what you're dealing with, which is anxiety, stress. And if we can put up the next slide here, we've come up with 15 little tips, and I know there are a lot of them, but if you can go to the first one, here are some tips that we have not only researched, but this is something that I have done, and I know you have been a practitioner of it, and I just wanted to share with you, and if you had any thoughts on it for our audience. Now, the first one, exercise. You know what? You don't have to go to the gym. You can just walk for 10 minutes. Get out there. And these are things that you can do as we are trying to deal with not just anxiety, but how do you organize your thoughts enough to get through the day? Get outside. And you know what? If you can't get outside, picture nature, you know, whether it's plants or in your house. Gardening, very, very releases a lot of the mood boosting chemicals that we so cherish when we are in our best. Of course, you know, there's the whole concept of sexual relations, slows anxiety. That's another one which we can talk about another time. Meditation. You know, a few minutes a day, even getting up in the morning, will help you with it. Of course, there's yoga. It lowers your heart rate. Once again, it is about focusing on something that allows you to organize your thoughts, especially when you're in a moment of anxiety. A lot of people have written me about acupuncture and how that has helped them throughout the last year. And I'm a practitioner as well, not a practitioner, but I am a recipient of acupuncture, and I will tell you it does help. Aromatherapy. Not many people actually have talked about this, but it's important to think about all the senses that we have when we're dealing with the onset of anxiety, including aromatherapy. And it's, you know, something that you can do very easily and very simple. And then if you can, and you know, it's hard to do with COVID, but every now and then, if we can get a massage or if you can get something that is more tactile and touch, I think it will be great. And then here's a couple of more real quick. Biofeedback. This is something, Richard, that I learned through my cancer fight. And that is that I sit with my doctor, and we do it now on Zoom, and he walks me through my latest results of my labs. And just talking about how that affects your mentality. How is that it's a feedback about your biorhythms and being someone that takes lab tests every 2 weeks. It makes a big difference. So, you know, if you're in that mode, talk to your doctor about, hey, what does this mean that I have high cholesterol, whatever. Biofeedback is important in a time of severe anxiousness, and sleep is critical. The recommendation is 7 to 9 hours. Alcohol, you know, it's good to have 1 or 2 a day, but that also can exacerbate you. Setting priorities. This is where keeping a journal and setting priorities are very, very similar. But the tricky part here is how can you set the priority, but then eliminate some of the small things. Let's get them out of the way. It makes you feel better. I mean, Richard, you have a whole book about repacking your bags. And how do you take things out of your quote unquote bag of life that are hurting you and removing them and then putting in stuff that actually helps, like these 15 tips. And then, of course, smile. We release endorphins and oxytocins whenever we smile. Believe it or not, a smile can make a big difference in a moment of complete and utter stress. Richard, any of these ring a bell with you? They should sound very familiar.
All of them ring a bell. And the one thing that is central to all of it is this: isolation is fatal. Going it alone with any of these is not a good idea. So there's the whole notion, Emilio, is you and I know of connectivity, that loneliness, whether with or without the pandemic, but with the pandemic for sure, is up, 36% among Americans, 61% up among youth. So feeling, even if you have these things that you're doing yourself, connectivity, which, they're embedded in all of those, they're all excellent. And so how do you go through it and connect with others?
Yeah. Hey, Richard, the question for today that we should ponder is, how can we grow from crisis?
Yeah.
How do right now we're all in the middle of a crisis, multiple crises. How do we grow even through these incredibly challenging times?
Yeah. With great difficulty. However, we do have choices. And, with all of this, there are, whether it's back in 9/11 or any of the other things, including the pandemic, is that breakdowns can lead to breakthroughs. And as Hemingway said, and one of your favorite quotes I know is, the world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong at the broken places. So the key is, how do we evolve, and how do we make choices at those broken places? I know that I've been leading walking trips in Africa for many years. So let's look at this picture of this lion, for example. One of the things I learned in these walking safaris and in life is, and I went to Africa, by the way, I was on the board of trustees of Outward Bound, the Wilderness Adventure School. And I was out in the bush in lion country and lion grass, just like this. And I was with a group of other trustees, and one of them had a complete breakdown, a meltdown. And he sat down in the middle of this lion grass and said, "We got to get out of here. And this is crazy. We shouldn't be here." And the fact is, we couldn't get out of there. We had to keep walking because our people who had dropped us off were gone, and they were going to meet us at the other end. And the Outward Bound instructor came back and said this. He said, "This is one of the great aphorisms of life. And that is, if you can't get out of it, get into it." And I think that's the key with the pandemic in certain ways. It's not simple, as you know, and with your cancer survivorship. But if you can't get out of it, get into it. Really dig in and figure out, what are your choices? What can you do? And those things you just listed were all choices. Those are all things that some people will do and others won't do, based on their ability or their willingness to make these kinds of choices. So we fortunately had no problems with lions, but we had to get into it. We had to really go and dig. And so if you can't get out of it, get into it. Is one of those things that I think is a universal truth, Emilio.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, Richard. And that's the whole concept of going through the funnel, rather than going around the funnel. But not everybody is equipped to do that, right? That's
but it has to do with one of my mentors. You have had many, and the people on this show have had many in different ways, but one of mine was Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And I spent a week with him in 1968, right out of graduate school. He practiced what's called tragic optimism. Now, think of a guy that was in 3 concentration camps. His whole family was killed. He survived. He weighed 87 pounds. He was liberated. He went back to Vienna, and he reimagined his life in many ways. And he said, between stimulus and response, between crisis and choice, is a choice. The choice is where our freedom as human beings lie. Now, that's hard. That's a kind of a hard message, but it's basic reality. And Frankl said, in spite of everything, say yes to life. Practice tragic optimism. What got him through the concentration camp experience, what will get us through the pandemic, I believe, at any level, is tragic optimism. Tragedy happens. There'll be others. But optimism is a a mindset. And he said this, Emilio, as you know, and you know how much he's influenced my life. He said, in spite of everything, say yes to life.
Hmm.
In spite of cancer, say yes to life in certain ways. And the you see this slide here of the globe. I had a chance to be with the chief of medicine for the astronauts and their families, the primary care physician for the astronauts and their families at the Johnson Space Center. And he said to me, he said, Richard, you know how many people have gone into space? I said, I had not a clue. He said, 600. You know how many have walked on the moon? 12. You know how many women have been in space? 60. And he said, you know, they've almost all of them have come back with a shift in consciousness, with a shift in choice, as we're talking about that. And what he said is this, that the central task is, we went to outer space, but he said the real big challenge was inner space. When they came back, they had to figure out how they were going to make a difference in the world. And almost all of them were shifted with a sense of purpose in certain ways. So I think what we're talking about here in this program, and what you're all about, Emilio, is the shift to inner space, this choice of what are the practices, all those practices you just listed, were all about inner space. And that's something that most of us didn't have much training about. And we need to have that. And that's why this program is important.
How could you close the gap, Richard, with this whole concept of tragic learning? Or, what are some of the tips that you would give us to just get the conversation going within our inner self?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I say there's this mindset of tragic optimism. So it starts with some sense of mindset. And the one thing I want to make sure that your viewers know is this, that this purpose thing that I'm going to mention right now is not a luxury. This is fundamental.
Yeah.
What Frankl and science and faith all agree about is that purpose is fundamental to human life. It is not a luxury. It's fundamental to health, as you know, to healing, to happiness, and ultimately longevity. People who have a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning beyond their own just self-absorption in certain ways, tend to live 7 to 10 years longer. So there's something called what I call, or what's called personal PTG. And that is, you've heard of, what's the right word? Personal traumatic growth, death and problems. But how about personal traumatic growth? And what we now know is that with personal traumatic growth, there are certain things that we learn through this pandemic. So here's a short quiz to your point. 5 things that we can learn from post-traumatic growth. Number 1, did you appreciate something in your life more than before this pandemic? And one of the things you can do is practice gratitude. All of a sudden, I'm more grateful for the smallest things in the world, going to a restaurant, a hug, a kind word, whatever it is. Secondly, improve an important relationship or end a bad one. Did you improve an important relationship or end a bad one? Well, through PTG, post-traumatic growth, we can learn to say no. We can learn about our boundaries and to say no to certain things and say yes to what really gives us life and gives others life. And third, did you discover a strength, something you didn't know you had before, a calling? And one of the things you can do, Emilio, is take 5 index cards and give them to 5 friends and colleagues and ask them to say, what's one strength? What's one gift that they notice that you have? And ask them for some input on that. It's amazing how we don't know our own strengths and gifts in certain ways until we get some input from others. And then 4th is gain confidence or become more courageous. What doors are opening for you? What doors are closing for you? Take some time to explore and open those doors. Be curious. Curiosity is what really drives purpose, what drives energy in certain ways, to be curious about others, not just yourself, but about others. If you're not curious, you're not on purpose. And finally, become more compassionate or forgiving. There are, as you know, 1,440 purpose moments in a day. If you take sleep out of that, there's maybe less, or there are less, but there's a chance to say you love somebody, to give somebody a kind word, hopefully at some time a hug, when we get out of this pandemic thing. But there are 1,440 chances to really get outside of yourself and make a difference. And that brings us out of our own depression, out of our own loneliness.
Yeah.
And there is something to end this, Emilio, that I've noticed in my work is something I call post-traumatic slump. It's not depression necessarily in the classic sense of clinical depression, but it's kind of a slump. I feel vulnerable. I feel lonely. I feel a certain sense of malaise. I don't know how to get out of this. Well, the only way out is in, as I said earlier. If you can't get out of it, get into it. The way to get into it is to give somebody else something, to get outside of your own self-absorption, and through that, you pull yourself out of it.
Yeah,
does that make sense to you?
That makes a lot of sense. And, if you noticed a few of the comments that are already coming in, one from 𝐓𝐈𝐕𝐄 talking about tapping your inner wisdom and compassion and resilience. Yeah. And it all really does start from that inward journey, which, by the way, it could be a very scary journey for a lot of people.
Of course.
We're not used to doing it, right? We're not used to it.
It's new territory, but isolation is fatal. Don't go it alone. Find a committed listener. Find a purpose partner. Find somebody to go with on the journey, and it'll be way better.
Yeah, you're right on, Soraya. Another comment: humans substitute a great part of their emotions with fear. One of my favorite authors, Paulo Coelho. And clearly, Richard, we're all going through some big changes that require us to get centered even. But final comment here is that, fear and laziness, we can all be lazy. We can all think, oh, well, but the fact is it takes courage to step up and between, as Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response is our freedom. Say yes to life in spite of everything. In spite of everything. Well, let's do this. Let's move on to get deeper into this, and I want to bring in another great practitioner, Doug Levy, who is not just an amazing crisis communicator extraordinaire, but Doug has been working very, 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 very closely with the COVID virus, and in fact has a new book out that is all about how do you communicate in the middle of COVID. How do you communicate and how do you do it? And he's affectionately known as a science and technology healthcare journalist. Doug, welcome to the barn. Happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. And what a great discussion you're already having, and so many comments that every one of us can relate to.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're in this together. But Doug, you have been working very closely, and I admire your tenacity on this, on how do you break through these pandemic communications obstacles. What can you help us with? I mean, give us a little bit of perspective from what have you found in the last, frankly, in the last year, but really in the last several months that you have been able to help others with. How do you get through these, and how do you communicate through them?
One of the things that we noticed very early on, I mean, literally, I did a workshop, I think at the end of February last year for a large company. And one of the things that I was trying to alert those people to is the idea that not everybody's experience of the pandemic is the same as yours. If you're sitting in New York, your experience is different from if you're sitting in San Francisco or Kansas.
Especially Kansas.
Or there's so many different variables. Even two people on the same block may have a very different perspective on what is happening. And before you begin to communicate, you've got to think through how is this other person, how is the person I'm trying to reach perceiving the crisis?
Right.
If you're talking to somebody who doesn't consider COVID a serious public health problem, you must communicate differently from when you're speaking to an audience of public health professionals.
Right.
That may seem basic, but a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, know your audience. That's rule number one. Know the audience. Know who you're getting through. Hey, Richard, in this world of communication and trying to understand what your what's next is, how does age factor into this? Are you either one of you seeing that, is there a millennial boomer breakdown on mindset, or is it all the same?
I'm not sure, but I know that personally, my wife Sally and I have some friends who aren't going to get vaccinated, and I have said, I'm sorry, but I won't be getting together with you. And that's to Doug's point, is a breakdown. I mean, it's like, really? And I said, really? It's really not about you. It's about all of us, not just about me. It's about all of us. And unless there's some real reason medically that you can't do this, and you're doing it for some other reason, I'm sorry, but that'll be something, I won't be seeing you. And it's already, what's the right word, not trash, but kind of ended the conversation with a couple of our closer friends. Yeah. And Doug, do you think, that's what you're saying, right?
I don't have a good answer for that particular issue. I've certainly seen what happens when you politely remind somebody on the bus that their mask slid off their nose. And you want to be charitable. You want to treat people nice. You want to treat yourself nice.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they are going to respond in kind. And at some point, you've got to do what's right for you. And in some cases, that may mean staying away from somebody who you don't feel safe around.
Right.
And at the same time, I also encourage people to ask questions, find out what is going on.
Right.
Maybe the individual has a reason, particularly if it's a friend. What are you concerned about?
Yeah.
Why are you afraid of putting on the mask, or what is it about the vaccine that makes you uncomfortable?
Right.
Engage in a constructive way instead of pushing information on others.
Right.
Yeah.
Very wise point.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's get real here, guys. The most important thing that people are struggling with right now, one of the most important things, unless you're afflicted by COVID directly, is how do I get this vaccine? How do I get an appointment? How do I, now some of the states are jumping all over the place and letting people in, 17 on, but you still need, in most cases, you still need an appointment. And that has become like the Willy Wonka golden ticket, fine in the world. And we have somebody in the show that I want to bring on that is actually doing exactly that and helping people with how to find the vaccine. Chris Brewer, welcome to the barn. And Chris has dedicated herself to helping people. This is amazing, to helping people get an appointment. And I call her a super booker and not a vaccinator. But Chris, welcome to the barn. And listen, I'm going to jump right in. How are we doing with that? How do we help people with a vaccine appointment?
Well, I want to start off by saying one of the things that I bring to the table here is that I'm not necessarily the most advanced booker. I work with some other people in a volunteer group who book faster than me, perhaps even more efficiently than me. But I'm not a particularly tech-savvy person, and I think it's actually been a help to me, because what I've been trying to do throughout the pandemic is also teach other people how to book from the perspective of a person that maybe isn't super tech-savvy. Because I personally feel that if we have any ability at all to make these appointments, and we can make them for ourselves, we can also make them for a neighbor who maybe, because they're older, because they don't have access, may need our help. And I found it a very rewarding thing that connects me with the people around me in ways that I never even could have imagined. I could never have imagined sitting here and talking with you right now about this. How we book for people depends very much on what state they're in, but there are people like me and my fellow volunteers in every single state who are either making sure that people know the tips on how to make these websites function for you, to get through the booking process with less frustration, what time of day, for instance, is most effective, or how to get past a first screen that says no appointments are available right now. Well, what about 5 minutes from now when someone else cancels? Where do I need to be on this website? And every state has people on Facebook groups or Twitter, Reddit lists of tips for each individual state. And so trying to find those people is where I would start, depending on where it is that you live.
Is there a telephone, or is there a site that we can all go to?
I would say a site to go to just for information on where the vaccine is around you is a national site, vaccinefinder.org. There are other sites for each individual state that sometimes may even be a little bit more accurate to your individual locality. But since obviously we have a national audience, I would say that's a good place to begin.
Yeah, and there it is scrolling, vaccinefinder.org. And we can go in there. But I want to come back to you in a minute, Chris. But I wanted to pick up a thread when you started talking about corporations that are helping. Doug, you are spending a lot of time also helping companies deal with communicating in the middle of the COVID crisis. What are some of the top line advice? And here, by the way, this is the book that everybody has to buy if you're in corporate America or not. The Communications Handbook for Coronavirus, and it's a great how-to in how to deal with it. I know I'll be ordering it, a copy of it. But Doug, how can you give us a little bit of an insight on how you're helping some of the companies and some of the folks that are listening today run these companies?
One of the starting points is just what's the right thing to do. People think that business leaders are only looking at the bottom line and dollars. And of course, they have to if they're accountable to shareholders or investors or owners. But generally speaking, if you do the right thing, follow the golden rule, the profits and revenue will follow. So how would you want to be taken care of if you were an employee? How would you want to be taken care of or talked to if you were a customer? What about your suppliers? How do you bring your community together? Because everybody has to come through this.
Right.
The economy is not going to get fully back up to speed until everybody is comfortable going back to work, going back to schools, going back to stores. It's got to be a collective process. It can't be top down. It should be top down reassurance. It should be transparency. It should be information. You should connect people with facts and accurate information. You should tell people where you are getting your advice from, but don't cram things down people's throats.
Yeah.
Respect your audience.
Just be there. Be there. Be present. As a brand, as a company, and as a person. Be present. That's half the battle. What Richard was talking about earlier, don't go at it alone. We now know from research that isolation is fatal. And think about it. We have been isolated for a year. I mean, it is wreaking havoc among, you name it. But let's go back. Let's go back to the reality of this on the vaccine. Chris, do you have an example that we can share with people on maybe even if it's just from CVS or whatever, that can give us the tricks, like for instance, what time of day you can get in and actually have a shot at the vaccine?
So my suggestion is I do have a video. I've prepared some videos and they are on my YouTube channel. They're not super fancy. They're what I could turn out quickly because the need here is very immediate. Right now, the challenge is getting getting appointments made as quickly as possible, and keeping people's frustration level as low as possible while they go through the process. So that when they want to book and they're ready to book and they're saying yes to the vaccine, they can see that through and not get frustrated and turn away. So I've been trying to put these things out as available. I made this one, I believe the date I made it was April 5th. And even since then, some of the time of day has shifted. In my area, it was very reliable that CVS was putting out their appointments at midnight. It seems like it's not every single night that it's happening, but New York is also experiencing a lot of people signing on right now because they did just open up vaccination to 16 and up just in the past week. So anyway, the video, I talk about how when you first see your state and it says there's no appointments that you can book right now, you can go in through any state. So networking yourself to people who know tips like that can help you to navigate these sites more effectively. And I put together a little video of how to do that for CVS.
So right before we roll in the video, I have to tell everybody that you have the best tchotchke of all of us.
It's my pandemic swag.
Dr. Fauci sitting next to you. So you're honoring Dr. Fauci.
Absolutely.
And we love him to death, but let's roll tape.
This is a brief overview of how to book an appointment for the COVID vaccine at CVS. The main points for booking at CVS are to be ready at midnight to do your search. Most appointments come out at that time. Secondly, your state doesn't have to be active on the screen. You can enter through any state. Halfway through the process, you can tell it where you want to actually do your search. The website does release cancellations at the hour and the half hour throughout the day, so you can try at those times as well, but the numbers will be much, much smaller. One notable feature about CVS is that they do permit you to book just a second dose if you should need it. As a heads up, you do need to take it easy with your clicking or the website will lock you out. And it'll tell you there's a glitch, but really that's the website locking you out. Let's get a little bit more into some detail in this brief overview. For each person who needs an appointment, you're going to want to set up a tab before midnight. Now, as you can see, I'm entering in through Alabama, not New York. Later on, I can choose New York in the process. Early on, you're going to get this option, am I starting vaccination or am I booking directly into a second dose? Here's where you'd make that selection. All of these prompts that ask for age, etc., I'm going through rather quickly here on the screen. You'll have time to do it more slowly, especially since you're going to do this before midnight when you have as much time as you need. If I'm making an appointment for someone whose area I'm not as familiar with, so town names and street names don't mean as much to me, I would also take a little bit of time before midnight to look at NYC's Vaccine Finder or perhaps the National Vaccine Finder. Links to both of those pages will be in the notes below this video. And I use those just to get an idea of some of the CVS's that might pop up in front of me. I might jot down a note with the names of the streets or the addresses so that when they pop up on my screen, I know what it is that I'm looking for. Ultimately, the goal here is to get the location set in the tab so that you can hit the magnifying glass exactly at midnight. You can use the zip code at that screen, or you can use the town name or the name of the region, or you can use the first 3 digits of the zip code with an asterisk. It depends on your geography, what's the best way for you to search. Here in New York City, NY, NY gives me the widest region. So you're going to click the little magnifying glass, but remember not to click too quickly. The footage that you're seeing here is sped up. Okay, so we're clicking at midnight, and then we see some locations pop up. You select a location, and then it'll give you some times, and you'll choose one, and you'll hit Continue Scheduling. Then you choose a location for the second dose. It usually offers you the same location. Then you click on the time, and then you'll complete the fields for the person's name, etc. The site will hold both the first and second dose appointments for 30 minutes while you fill in the information. So if you weren't sure about the location, now's a good time to check. You can choose the option to go back and choose a different appointment. If you're still kind of not too long after midnight, there'll still be a lot of activity in this website. And at 12:30, there are a lot more cancellations from this group that are released. Just like during the day, at the hour and the half hour, cancellations will come out. Once you've finished booking an appointment, you'll get a basic confirmation sheet followed by a more detailed email. At whatever email you specify, whether that's your own or if it's the email of the person that you're booking for. It is more difficult to cancel if you don't have access to that email, so think about that in terms of choosing where to send it. You can book more than one appointment, at least temporarily, for the same person to the same email address. Just be sure to cancel the less desirable appointment as quickly as possible so someone else can book it and so there isn't any problem with the appointment long term. So just a recap on CVS, enter through any state, have your tabs ready, Be ready for midnight when the majority of the appointments come out. Remember that cancellations will also be released on the hour and on the half hour.
That's awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, everything that I put in there is information that I learned from other people online, as well as in the group that I'm honored to volunteer with, Epicenter NYC. And I've learned that 6 a.m. is another good time to do this. Really, just the oddball hours of the night, have those tabs ready, and you can go from one family member to the next, get it all set, then enter their information and get it booked. Right now, the challenge is still getting appointments. Eventually, we'll have the ability to just get the vaccine, and we may shift from having more vaccine than arms, but not quite yet.
Yeah, no, listen, by the way, I have done it. I did exactly what you were portraying, and I got both of my shots in, and I did it through CVS. I think the most important thing that I love that you've given us is the tips of midnight or thereabouts, 6 a.m., and enter with any state.
Any state at all. As long as there are states you can enter through, every once in a while the whole system just gets overwhelmed. But as long as you can enter through a state, get in there, get your tab set, be ready, and learning those kind of tips for this website or for any of the websites in your region is what's going to make this less frustrating, so that you can optimize what time of day you're doing this, how long you spend doing it. Because if you get frustrated and burned out and check out of this, then you're not getting that shot in your arm, and that's the goal.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. That's awesome.
Sure.
Richard, I wanna pick up on that thread. Now you have found a vaccine, or at least a vaccine time, excuse me, and you are now feeling like you're free to do whatever it is that you need to do to get your life back together again. And then you're faced with what Doug is talking about. We still need to wear masks. We still need to be distant. We still have to have separation. And there's a level of enormous frustration that takes hold. How do you break through that and still stay on purpose and have a shot at having a less stress about this?
I have no idea, Emilio. I mean, I have had my 2 shots. I still wear a mask. I still don't travel. I still don't go into restaurants. So it gets down to basically morality and ethics and common sense. And that is, what are you willing to do and what are you not willing to do? And I'm at a point now where I'm not willing to do, so I can't advise others at this point.
Doug,
but I do.
What do you have?
Well, I just took my first trip in months, and kind of dipped my toe in the water, and I think that's the way to do it. Gradual and mindful that not everybody is going to be as careful as you might want to be or want them to be, and we do need to come out of this, but we need to do it when it is safe and responsible. And as the president keeps reminding us, we are not out of this yet, so we do have to be careful and continue with a lot of public health protocols when we're outside. When we're inside with friends and family, you can relax.
Yeah. Well, listen, we have talked about how to get the vaccine. We've talked about the bigger picture, about how to do the inward journey in order to find that moment of clarity, the moment of peace. But I want to take it up a notch here, if you guys can. Richard, you have a new book coming out, which I can't wait to do a show on. And once again, it's called "What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Old?" That's a kind of a provocative twist on the concept of what do you want to be when you grow up. Tell us this book and how does it relate to where we are right now in the pandemic?
Well, it's actually, who do you want? The question when you were younger was, what do you want to be when you grow up? Now this is, who do you want to be when you grow old? The path of purposeful aging. And we go through 2 major adult shifts. One is from adolescence to adulthood, and the other is from adulthood to elderhood. And as we get older, we look at, are we getting old? Yes, you're getting old since you were born, but are you growing old? And so the whole question is, what does it mean to grow and continue to grow in this new phase of life? And the pandemic has thrown us a curveball on that in certain ways, but in other ways, it's asked us to really step back, because wisdom is seeing the big picture and knowing what is important, what way to give things. And so there's a lot of knowledge and information about the pandemic, but wisdom is what Doug and Chris have been reporting on. Is, you know, it's really making choices based on our wisdom as not just older people, but as with the information we have. And so in certain ways, what this book is all about is about growing old our whole lives. And the fact is, this is the major point I want to make, and that is that many of us live a default life. And the default life is really about kind of being on automatic and just taking what comes. Well, that's not, you know, you can't just do a default life with the pandemic. You've got to make your own choices based on your own information and your own wisdom. And that's what the book's all about. It's about living longer. You know, we're now living 3 decades, 30 years longer. What's the point of the exercise? You remember the game of life? Any of you remember that?
Absolutely.
The Game of Life came out in 1860.
Wow.
And it's been upgraded many, many times since that. But it's based on an old model, an old autopilot model. If you're on the old autopilot model with the pandemic, you're not using your wisdom. You're not using the information that's available to you, as an example. But we're now living 3 decades longer. Are we going to still live the same way we did in the past? I don't think so.
Yeah. Let's do something different. And we typically do this at the barn, and that is, let's do a lightning round. And let me throw a question on the lightning round. In your experience, from the vantage point that you have, how and what tips do you have for coping, the coping mechanism? I went through my 15 steps or my 15 examples of anxiety. And I would say, for me, I would start it with this whole concept of go outside, you know, take a break. When things get absolutely overwhelming, go outside. Even if you're in an apartment, take a walk around, you know, do whatever. But you need to change your environment in that moment of supreme anxiety to just help you, you know, get yourself together long enough to think through what's next and how do you do it. And I know that has helped me in the past. But anybody else want to jump in on a lightning round?
I would pile on that, say I totally agree with that. And the second thing I would say is get outside of yourself. Grow and give. In other words, grow, do something with your curiosity today to learn, and give to one other person in a nanosecond. Doesn't have to be any big thing, but when you're growing and giving outside of yourself, you're on purpose.
I love that, Richard. And by the way, I don't know if you can see it or not, but here's my purpose: grow and give. And that is I have this on my desk. I have this on my bathroom mirror.
I have mine on my mirror in the other room too, because, you know, it's basically the truth, whether you like it or not. It's so simple. It's universal.
It's universal. And, you know, when people ask me, hey, can you give me some purpose advice, as I've learned from you? Yeah, that's your default purpose: grow and give. But that, you know, but not everybody. You know, everybody has a different flavor of that. Yeah, and I love that. Doug or Chris, what are some of your tips?
Hard to beat those, but I would also just say, you know, remember the golden rule. You know, this is the best time of our lives to do what is right, and do what is right for yourself. Do what is right for others, and I'm definitely encouraged. I've seen so many people boost their philanthropy, boost their volunteering, just picking up the phone and helping a neighbor with the groceries, or calling and saying, hey, are you okay? Do those little things that too frequently we would forget in the before COVID times.
Yeah, excellent. Absolutely right.
Absolutely. And by the way, that helps you grow internally and makes you feel nice and warm at a moment where we're not. And
Yeah, right.
and I know it sounds, I always say, and Richard has taught me this, these tips that we're giving you today sound like common sense.
They are.
They're super common sense. The trick is to make them common practice.
Right.
How do you open up and let that in? Chris, how about you? What do you have?
I'm going to say that since I'm here to talk about vaccines in particular, to see it as an opportunity to connect with others. If you find that you are not comfortable with the websites and you need some help, but you have a friend who got an appointment, find out what they did and who helped them. Or talk to someone in your family. I mean, we have the stereotypes that it's younger people that are better at this than others of us. But connect with the people in your life who have navigated this and let them help you. It's really rewarding when you can help somebody else get the thing that we're all trying so hard to get. It's frankly practically addictive when you have that moment and you hand somebody else something at no cost. It's no cost to me to help somebody else do this. If you need the help, ask other people for help. And if it takes two friends to connect you to their friend who helped them, that person will help you too. And they might teach you something that you didn't know before, or they may be able to directly assist you. But to reach out, and if you have the skills, to reach out and share them with other people. It feels good after all the time that we've spent stuck in our own little tiny boxes waiting to come out, to help each other out.
I love that. And at the same time, you're helping yourself.
Absolutely. It feels great. I mean, I'm contributing something just by looking around and seeing a need and responding to it and connecting with other amazing volunteers doing the same. This has been an incredible experience. Just
remember, everybody, if you have any questions, please send them in. I know we have a lot of comments that are coming in, but if you have any questions, please let's bring them up for our guest. One thing too, Doug, that I was thinking about as we get out of the pandemic, as we get into a more safer zone, the question is, are we ever going to go back to the same patterns of normality? And I don't think we are. I think we need to prepare ourselves for that. And that's another tip, is to prepare for that eventuality that, you may not like going to work and taking the commute as much anymore. Now, all of a sudden you want to maybe stay home. How is that going to be received by corporate America? And in fact, how is corporate America flipping the switch and saying, we need to do something different?
We're certainly seeing companies all across the spectrum going different ways. This is an opportunity for every one of us to help create the future that we want, because nobody has the playbook. There is no standard answer. But I do think there's a lesson from history that we should bear in mind. Many of us have parents or grandparents who were particularly sensitive to certain things, like germaphobes, right? Certain things you were never allowed to touch. I've only recently realized that some of those habits go back to 1918 and surviving the pandemic flu of 1918. There's going to be lasting impact from COVID. How can we leverage those things in a positive way? We've had hardly any flu or colds this past year because of social distancing and hygiene. Well, maybe some of it should become part of normal life and be appreciated instead of resented.
I love it. And we also have another tradition here at the barn, and that is that we always bring in our intrepid producer. And Stefan, welcome back, and thank you. What wisdom words do you have for us after listening to all of these pieces of advice?
Yeah, I was listening to Doug and Richard and Chris talk about, giving and doing these great things during the pandemic. And, it hit me that, wow, that's exactly the same thing I did. So we're in the right group here. What a beautiful group of people. Because when, things developed recently with a friend of mine who developed stage 4 colon cancer and also has liver cancer at the same time that he's dealing with, I decided as a social media and visual strategist and as a photographer to put up dozens of my shots that I've taken over the years. And his name is Tim McDonald. He's written about it, so it's not a secret. I would never reveal somebody's privacy. But I put all of about 100 photos up for sale, and I raised, quite a bit of money for him, and I sent every penny to him because, you know what? We're all struggling, but he needs help more than anybody else. And it just felt so beautiful and so wonderful to help a dear friend that way. And, we all wish him well. But there's always somebody in a different situation, in a tougher situation. And I think we always have to remember that and just do the best we can do and help those other people first.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. We have a lot to be thankful for, even in the middle of a massive disruption to our lives and our families. And I want to also do a shout out to some friends that I have had the privilege of working with most recently. And those are the folks at the Milken Center for the Advancement of the American Dream. And I think in many ways, the American dream is at a moment of great peril. The concept of the dream, but also the opportunity to create, as Doug said, a whole new way of thinking about how do I survive? How do I thrive? As we started the show, how do I thrive through crisis? And here's their website. Please go visit them out at mccad.org. They're a great bunch of people, and Michael Milken, a great hero in this field. And I miss you guys, and we'll keep that in mind as we go forward. But I want to thank each and every one of you. You guys have brought a warmth to the barn here that we haven't felt, frankly, Stefan, in a long time. And this is a very special moment for a lot of people that need tips, shortcuts. Don't forget, midnight. It's the best time to get a vaccine appointment. Go to the vaccine.org, vaccinefinder.org, and start the process there. Call a friend. Richard, thank you for your amazing insights. We got to keep reminding ourselves that happiness doesn't come directly from happiness. It goes through purpose and meaning. That's the lasting component of happiness. Which reminds me that we have an amazing show coming up next on happiness, actually. And we have to start with, our dear friend, Dr. Christine Whelan, is going to be leading us away and finding happiness and, frankly, the myths and the realities of that. And we have some very important surprises for you, a couple of folks that have written the book on it. So that's our next challenge, is how do we get through all of this and at the same time find that moment of happiness that we're looking for. I hope that you have picked up a few tips. Thank you for all those wonderful comments from all of our viewers. Chris, keep up the good work. You're one of our heroes trying to help us through. Doug, the same thing. We want everybody to buy your book and help us get through the next step. And Richard, our next show is going to be on the book itself, and I can't wait. Can't wait for that. But if anybody has any lasting comments, or farewell to all of our friends, release. Everybody good? Richard, Doug, Chris?
I think what you're doing,
you.
What you're doing is really important. What people need are practices, and that's what you're all about. There's the framework, but there's what do I do tonight or tomorrow? And so thank you for that.
I wanted to add one thing. Emilio, you have been through a lot, and everything that you're doing to get information out there by doing the show, it's an honor to produce this show with you, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you to everybody. The honor is mine, and it's all about the real talk. We don't mix words around here. All right, my friends, we are ready to roll. Until the next time, keep it real. Thank you.
Thank you.